Hello YouTube, and welcome back to this beautiful forest. Recently, I had a conversation with a friend of mine who has issues with people in his life who constantly disrespect him. And because he's a very nice guy, he doesn't quite understand why. He doesn't understand why some people would be so mean to him and why some people would take advantage of him all the time. And because of this, he was stuck, and he came to me because he knows that I'm not like this, that I'm much meaner, I'm much more of an asshole. And so he wanted some advice, and I gave him that advice. And as I did, I realized that a lot of you guys might also fit that profile. You might also be the type of person who gets abused constantly by people in your life. So today I'm going to be teaching you about the predatory strategies that those who abuse you utilize to hurt you times and times again, because there are strategies, it's not random. I'm also going to tell you about the reasons that might make you especially susceptible to these strategies, because if you are time and times again abused, it's also because there's something in you that make it possible and that attract that type of people. It's going to make it so that you're going to be able to protect yourself from these attacks, and hopefully that is going to greatly improve your life. So if you're on board with all of these things, I hope you're going to greatly learn and enjoy this video. And if you do, as always, please consider supporting the channel on Ko-fi. It's the first link in the description. These heart-to-heart talks take me a lot of time to write, and I enjoy doing them, but without your support, they would not be possible. So if you are willing, you could pledge $3 a month, and that would make a tremendous difference for me. And with that out of the way, we can get started. So first, I want to establish the why. Why do people go out of their way to be mean? Why do people take advantage of others? We could wonder why it's not just possible for everyone to live in harmony and for everyone to just be nice to one another. That would be optimal. The problem is that this doesn't quite align with human nature. Human nature is first and foremost a story of selfishness. And it's not the only thing we are. We also are benevolent and social creatures. But it is this nature as social beings that also means that when we interact with one another, an instinct we're going to have immediately is the instinct of self-preservation. We're going to try within these interpersonal relationships to gain advantages for ourselves. And so this means that people are going to first and foremost, when they interact with you, look out for their best interest. Some people out there, some saints, are not like this. Well, they're going to be nice right off the bat, but these people are few and far between. The majority of people, if they get an opportunity to fuck you over, if it benefits them, they're going to do it, even if it means hurting you. This is a tough pill to swallow, I understand, but it's one that the sooner you understand, the easier your life is going to be, because it's going to put you on your guard. Most likely, if you're the type of person who gets taken advantage of, one of the reasons is because you have yet to swallow that pill. And so you look at the world through rose-tinted glasses. You have a tendency to see the best in people. And this is not necessarily a bad thing. I don't want this video to turn you into someone like me who is callous and who is cynical. Instead, I just want you to realize that this outlook that you have on life is extremely naive, because sometimes it's going to be true, sometimes it's not going to be true. And when it's not true, this is going to set you up for failure, it's going to set you up for disappointment. This is what distinguishes you from me, is the fact that I have walls and you don't. And the reason why you don't is because of what I explained previously. I'm a bad person, so I perceive everyone else as a potential bad person. I know what I could do to people if they don't have walls, and so I put up walls because I know for a fact that they're needed. You are a kind person, so you go out in this world thinking everyone is like you, and since you would never take advantage of someone who doesn't have walls to protect themselves, you think that everyone is going to extend the same courtesy to you. The truth of the matter is, this is not the case at all. A lack of wall for the majority of people is an invitation to take advantage of you. And that's not because humanity is evil. I don't want to verse into this type of very cynical and very misanthropist philosophy. Instead, I believe that people are only as good as you allow them to be. And they're also, from the flip side, only as bad as you allow them to be. The majority of people are neutral. Once they interact with you, based on how you protect yourself, they're going to decide which way they're going to veer. If they see and perceive that they can be mean or evil and it brings advantage to them, then they're going to do it because nothing prevents them from doing it. So if these people interact with someone who has high self-respect and strict boundaries, they're going to behave, they're going to be quote-unquote good, and if they're facing someone who lacks these qualities, they will instinctively take advantage of them. Again, not because they're evil, but because they can. And this leads us to another tough pill to swallow. The reason why you, a kind person, runs into so many assholes is because your weakness turns otherwise benign individuals into assholes. As I said, the majority of humans are neutral. They will take advantage of perceived weakness, which then in return turns them evil. I can guarantee you that there are some people in your life that treat you very poorly, that don't behave like this with other individuals in their lives. What is the difference between you and them? Well, it's very simple. These people have boundaries. These people check these assholes and you don't. And so you give them the opportunity to be assholes. And this is, of course, horrible for you because you get mistreated. But on top of that, I guarantee you that there are potential relationships that you have ruined because you refuse to put your foot down and set boundaries. There are some love interests, there are some potential brotherhoods that were ruined because you were facing people who perceived your weakness as something to be taken advantage of, whereas if you could have established strong boundaries, these people would have respected you and potentially it would have led to something beautiful down the line. With that type of mentality, you are going to turn off a lot of people, especially if you're a male. The majority of women who are going to look for a male, they're going to seek a partner in you, will not put up with that type of bullshit. If you're not able to stand up for yourself, why would they consider you as a potential mate? You're never going to be able to stand up for them. You've already demonstrated that. This is why I want you to understand and integrate that this weakness of yours is not part of your personality or identity. It's a pathology. It's something that you have developed. And we'll talk later why you've developed it because there is a reason. But right now, I just want to make clear that this is a problem that we have to solve. Because times and times again, and I know how your brain works because I have a lot of experience with people like you have refused to set boundaries because you wanted to be nice. You didn't want to be too severe. You didn't want to impose your will on others. And at the end of the day, I want to be absolutely clear that all of this, you not wanting to clearly establish things that you're not willing to tolerate, you not being willing to actually establish strong boundaries, has nothing to do with you being nice and everything to do with you being weak. It's because whenever you have these interpersonal relationships, you know for a fact that if you are to actually set these boundaries, you are going to have to fight for them, and fighting for them might be scary because it's going to lead to conflict. This is the nature of a boundary. A boundary is a sign of mental fortitude. It's you saying this will not come to pass, and if someone attempts, you stop them, you check them. And a boundary might be tested 50, 100, 1,000 times. It is only as strong as you are willing to make it, because a boundary in reality is nothing. It's just a word, just like a promise. A promise is empty until you fulfill it, just like a threat. Nothing is more pathetic than an empty threat. If you times and times again create empty threats, people stop taking you seriously. The same with boundaries. If times and times again your boundaries are just empty words, soon enough, no one is going to respect anything that you say because you have demonstrated that you're not willing to stand up for what you say. And that's an image I proposed on the channel in the past. I'm going to repeat it here because I think it's quite valid and it's going to help you picture what a boundary should be. A boundary is like a castle fortification. By itself, it doesn't do much, right? If you're not willing to stand atop the fortification and shoot the people who want to breach it or climb over it, you might as well not have a wall because it's completely fucking useless. And I know that this escapes a lot of people because I meet people in my life who think that boundaries are like magical spells. Like you should be able to tell people, please don't do this, and they will be spellbound by their kindness, I guess. But what if they don't have that kindness? Again, this is you projecting the way you function. You most likely, when someone sets a boundary, respect it outright because you are kind. But someone like me, I'm going to test your boundary just for the heck of seeing if it's actually there. And if I find that it's not actually there, I'm not going to respect it because it doesn't actually exist. But again, I also know the reason why many people are not willing to fight for these boundaries and why their boundaries are always empty. It's because once the boundary is established and I come to check it, for you to be able to defend it, you're going to have to face conflict. And because you most likely have assimilated conflict as a negative thing, you times and times again shy away from defending your boundaries because you are deathly afraid of what it would mean. And this is also normal. We live in a very passive-aggressive society nowadays, where the majority of people are afraid of conflict. But here's the issue, and here is something that is critical to understand. Just because you run away from conflict doesn't mean that conflict suddenly disappears. And it certainly doesn't make you immune to it, right? If you times and times again evade situations that could potentially lead to conflict, the only thing it does is it makes you more prone to being the target of people who are going to know that you don't like conflict, and so they're going to push you into situations where they know you're going to back off like a bitch because you're not going to want to be put in that uncomfortable situation. And granted, that's normal. A conflict with another human being is uncomfortable. It's scary because you're unsure of the outcome. But here's the thing. If you run away from that conflict, you already guarantee that the outcome is going to be your defeat, because you automatically lose every confrontation that you refuse to enter. And to be clear, I'm not talking about a fight here. I'm not talking about physical conflict, because in a civilized society, these are extremely rare. I mean, as an adult, I've gotten into exactly 0 fistfights, but I've gotten into hundreds of conflicts. Most of the time, these conflicts remain verbal. They stay at the verbal level. It's what I would call micro confrontations. But the thing is that even though few, if none, actually, of these micro confrontations lead to physical violence, the occurrence of micro confrontations has risen, meaning that even though you are much less likely to get beaten up, you are now much more likely to run into these micro confrontations. And these usually take the form of people who are going to push and are going to probe at your boundaries to test how much they can get away with. Again, this is rarely something that people do with logic in mind. It's rare that people actually engineer plans to fuck with your boundaries. Oftentimes, it's just instinct, because we are designed to see how much we can get away with. And so this means that you can never really escape these conflicts. They will be everywhere. They will be at your school, they will be at your job, they're going to be with your girlfriend or partner, and even with your kids. Once you have kids, you realize that these little fuckers are designed to do that shit. No one trains them. No one is stupid enough to train their kids to push boundaries. They just look at adults and they just replicate. And you know what happens if you don't set up strict boundaries with your kid. They become monsters, they become demons, because they learn instinctively that they can get away with a lot. And because they're selfish, naturally, they're going to want more and more and more until you check them. And when you check your kids and you teach them boundaries, you do a service to them, and you also do a service to society, because now you won't end up with adults who are going to become pushers. They won't become adults that are going to become potentially dangerous, because they're going to start preying on people's kindness. But unfortunately, education can only do so much, and that instinct is always going to be present. So if in every situation of life you become the weak link because you're the one with no boundaries, guess what? Every single person is going to is going to download that instinct and that willingness to take advantage onto you. You're going to be the bottom bitch in every single scenario, which is why I said previously that the one factor that makes it so that you are always prime target is that weakness we already described. And to give you an example, I have one from my own life. A perfect example of what happens when you have people with weak boundaries and people with strong boundaries all in the same environment. And I am quite eager to share that example with you, because the pusher in this scenario, the boundary tester, is myself. I am the asshole in this scenario, and I was the one taking advantage of people. Here is how it went. When I was in grad school, I was working for a university as a teacher, and so I had access to an office and also to shared spaces. Shared spaces are matters of boundaries, because if it's shared, we're supposed to all be equal and all be able to use it equally. But the thing is that I'm not like this. If you put me in a shared space and no one prevents me from doing it, eventually that shared space is going to become my space. And this is exactly what happened. The people who shared my office were weak and they didn't have any boundaries, so that office eventually became mine. I took up most of the space and I was there all the fucking time. It was to the point where these people started to have to ask me to be able to use the office, which was completely backwards. Then we also had a shared kitchen. Guess what happened to the shared kitchen? It became mine. I started to store off my food in their fridge. I started to put all of my dirty dishes in the sink, and I would never do them. Why? Because no one was checking me. I would put dirty dishes in the sink and I would come back the next day and they would be done. Why the fuck would I not do that? Same with my food. I would take up all of the fridge and no one would tell me shit because they were afraid of conflict. Guess what? That's now my fridge. This is now mine. All of this is mine. This is prime boundary pusher mindset. I'm sharing this with you because I don't really care if you think I'm a bad person. This is how I am. I know this about me. And I also know that what prevents me from that type of behavior is one thing and one thing only, and that is someone with strong boundaries. So this is what happened to me because karma eventually found its way into my life because I was eventually checked. So in this entire department, everyone was a weakling and no one would stand up to me, save for one person. That person's name was Jenny, and she was a woman in her 60s. Jenny didn't really take care of the kitchen or really enter into my office. She was sort of like a secretary on the side. But eventually, that Jenny wanted to use the sink. And when she used the sink, what did she find? She found my dirty dishes. So instead of just taking it, instead of doing my dishes like a better bitch, she took all of it. She entered my office when I wasn't there because she had a key, and she dumped all of my dirty dishes onto my desk. Now you could say, well, this is bitch behavior and it's over the top. No, that's called a fucking boundary. I was doing something wrong. No one had the balls to call me out on it, and she did. And guess what happened afterwards? She didn't have to tell me anything. She didn't have to beat me up or even insult me. She just sent a message, and that message was understood 100%. I, from this point on, stopped leaving my dirty dishes in the sink. It's as simple as this. So the moral of the story is that when it comes to pushers like myself, the only thing we understand is resistance, and the only form of resistance we understand is boundaries that are protected. The rest doesn't work. Nice talks and trying to get through the bottom of things and assuming that I'm going to, for some reason, respect your boundaries because I'm kind, all of that is bullshit. And I say this as someone who's like a low-level pusher. Right? I'm not dangerous. I don't take advantage of people if it's going to hurt them. I just, if I can, take up more space than I need to just because who's going to stop me? You will meet people in your life who are actually going to become parasitic, who are going to take advantage of you monetarily, who are going to vampirize your feelings, who are going to sabotage your relationships or your opportunities just because they can. Do not allow them to do that to you. And it doesn't just stop at your own person, because what you have to understand is that in this story, by sticking up for herself, because she was pissed at my behavior, Jenny didn't just protect herself. She didn't just protect her boundaries. She also made the work environment healthy. Now, I also started becoming nicer and more lenient towards people who weren't Jenny. And this is a lesson that, as a society, we seem to have forgotten. If there are toxic elements within society, the solution is not to ignore them. That doesn't fucking work. They just get more toxic and they take advantage of more people. What you need to do is you need someone to check them so that everyone else can benefit. And it's even not just Jenny and the rest of the department that benefited. It's also me. Because on that day, she taught me a lesson. So paradoxically, by being mean to me with her boundaries, Jenny also gave me an opportunity to be good. Likewise for you. You times and times again refuse to rock the boat because you think that it's nice and it's kind and you don't want to press people. But in reality, the only thing you're doing is you're allowing people to misbehave. You're not giving people a chance to treat you the way you want to be treated. Remember that you have a responsibility towards your own environment because you pick the people who surround you. So if your circle of friends is toxic, guess why that is? You. Motherfucker, you. It's because you allow them to be toxic towards you. And I personally, as someone who pushes like a motherfucker, sometimes see some of my friends or acquaintances or connections, I look at the way they're treated by their boyfriend, girlfriends, or acquaintances, and I'm like, you fine with this shit? If someone spoke to me like this, I would cut them off or check them so fucking fast their head would spin. But these individuals, no, they just sit there and then they complain. They say, well, I don't understand why my boyfriend is such an asshole. Because you allow him to be an asshole. And the problem is that if you become complacent and you just accept that toxicity in your life, guess what? You're going to start to become a magnet for that toxicity because sadly, beyond people like me who are pushers, there are also people out there who are predators. And these predators are the types that I described earlier, the ones that actually are dangerous because they will go much further than just take advantage of you for an afternoon. These people might end up ruining your life. And these people also have a sixth sense for weakness. They have a very good eye to detect the prey within the pack, the ones that are not going to defend themselves. And these are the ones that they go for times and times again. Just like a lion is always going to go for the weak prey that is sick or too old to defend itself. Why? Because it's safer. If you're going to pick someone that you're going to vampirize, you're not going to pick someone who's going to stand up for themselves. You're not going to pick someone who's going to give you shit for it. You're going to pick the person who you know is going to just let it happen. And that is the fucked up part of the so-called law of attraction that is not discussed enough. The law of attraction goes both ways. Yeah, you can engineer a positive life with positive thoughts and actions, absolutely. But the opposite is also true. You can engineer a nightmare realm of a life if you are constantly allowing toxic and negative people to take advantage of you because you just refuse to put your foot down. And this is why, by the way, victims tend to get re-victimized. This is backed up by statistics. People who get taken advantage of in situations that might range from like robberies to violent crimes to people just robbing your bank information, whatever. These people have that happen to them their entire life. Why? Because of what I explained previously, law of attraction. They have no defense mechanism. It's like if there was a bank somewhere and every single chest in the bank had a code and yours didn't have one. Well, every single time there's a robbery, your money is going to be stolen because you don't have a fucking code. So you are the easier one to access. And that is how you become everyone's punching bag. Now, usually, if you're like this, if you find yourself to resemble the description I just gave, most likely it's because you have a certain set of personality traits that all people who tend to get victimized share. And these victimization factors are threefold. The first one is high agreeableness. So you're very unlikely to oppose people, right? You're very unlikely to say no to people. You're very unlikely to impose your will because you think somehow that this is you being nice. That's not you being nice, but we've already established that. Then the second factor is you are most likely a people pleaser. So you times and times again go out of your way to make other people's lives better. You set yourself on fire to keep other people's warm. That is deeply misguided because it fills you with bitterness, and on top of that again, it makes you someone who is very easy to take advantage of. Most likely this is because you have very low self-worth, and so you are now dependent on others for it. You have started to believe that your only worth is in what you can provide to others. That is untrue, but I'm just talking about the traits here. We're going to talk about the cures later. And then the third victimization factor is the fact that you're afraid of conflict. And we already spoke about that. Now, these traits usually are rooted in childhood. It's nurture. You were poorly prepared by your parents or your environment at some point or the other taught you the wrong lessons. So, for example, if you had a very headstrong parent who times and times again entered conflict with you or other people in your household, most likely it taught you not to fight back, right? It could go two ways in reality. You could become someone who's very opinionated, like myself, or you could become someone who is very passive because you have learned that if you just don't say anything, you're not going to run into any issues. That is terrible because eventually, as I explained, conflict is going to find you and you will not be able to escape it. Another factor of childhood that could modify your behavior is the fact that you might have a parent who only gave you positive reinforcement when you did something for them. So the only moment they gave you attention or affection is when you did something beneficial directly for them, which means that you started to derive your self-worth from them. You were never taught internal self-worth, and that going forward also makes you a prime target for people who are going to use you because you're making yourself available for use. You have demonstrated and you have advertised to the world that you are there to be used. And of course, none of these traits are things that you like about yourself or that you actually wanted to develop. No one is trying to become easier to abuse. That makes no sense. These are actually defense mechanisms. They're just things that you had to put in place to protect yourself at an age where you had no other option. So I'm not blaming you for it. It's not your fault. But you have to always keep in mind that these things are not part of you. These are things that can actually and should actually be removed from your personality because they have become directly detrimental to your well-being, which is, by the way, the reason why abusers and predators like to create these traits in their victims. This is why abusive parents, for example, or an abusive partner will go out of his way to break down your self-esteem. Because if your self-esteem is low, you are very unlikely to leave. And more importantly for them, you are much easier to abuse in the future because self-worth and self-esteem are also defense mechanisms. If you believe truly that you are worth something, that you are important, when someone, okay, buddy, when someone goes out of their way to insult you, you're not going to take it lying down because you'll think, hey, I have internal value, I am precious, how dare you come after me? But if you think to yourself, well, I'm just trash, if someone treats you like trash, you're going to think, hey, part for the course, this is absolutely normal. But this is not normal, and this is what I want this video to convey. Well, yes, you are partly to blame for the abuse that you receive because you let it happen. At the end of the day, the people that abuse you are, of course, the culprits in the entire story. But here is the issue. These people will never stop. It always amuses me when talking about these topics, when I see people get mad at me, at the messenger, for telling the truth, saying things like, oh, how dare you say that me, the poor victim, might be even 1% at fault. It's all of the abuser's fault. Of course it is. But the abuser knows that what they're doing is not right, and yet they keep doing it. If it was as easy as telling people, hey, stop committing crimes, we wouldn't need the police, we wouldn't need prisons. All of these are in place because they serve as boundaries. They serve as repercussions and consequences when people misbehave. If you are and you have a country with no laws and no penalties, guess what would happen? That country would be a criminal hellhole because while there are good people who would just behave properly, naturally, because they are not mean, others would see the absence of rules and of boundaries and say, hey, it's my fucking birthday, I'm going to do whatever the fuck I want. And in that scenario, in that analogy, you are the country. So it's up to you to create a strong police force. It's up to you to create strong boundaries and strong walls and prisons to make sure that these bad people cannot fuck with you. This is a responsibility that you owe to yourself. Because what will happen if you don't do that work is either you'll become a perpetual victim, which is a fate in a sense worse than death, because once you become that, you end up embracing the victim mentality, and when people try to go out of their way to help you free yourself from the victimhood, you're going to attack them because you're going to perceive that they attack your identity. Please never let yourself get to that situation because at this point, you are beyond saving. Or two, you will turn jaded and you'll start hating humanity. And this is also not something that I want, because if you are the type of person that resonates with this video, it means that you still have that kindness in you. The kindness that I personally don't have. I got rid of them a long time ago because I found it was just a weight. It was just something that was preventing me from actually not being abused by people all the fucking time. But I've come to realize that it was a mistake in a sense. And I also think that it is possible to preserve that kindness while at the same time defending yourself. So, now that we've established why people disrespect you and the personality traits that make this abuse possible, I'm going to give you actionable items you can start working on to stop that cycle while at the same time preserving your kindness. The first thing I want you to do, and this is integral, is get comfortable with conflict. Because as we've established, boundaries are the key to this entire thing, and boundaries require you to be okay with confrontation. And to be able to free yourself from this fear, understand that the fear of conflict is an illogical one, because you're fearing something that is very unlikely to happen. Most of the time, the fear of conflict is worse than the outcome of the conflict itself. For the simple reason that if you're afraid of conflict, this also means that other people are also afraid of conflict. So the possibility of it snowballing into violence or potential death is extremely small because it would require the other party to also be willing to fight. Meaning that when someone checks one of your boundaries, in reality they're bluffing. They're trying to see if you're going to be willing to play that game, if you're going to want to dance. But since you stop at the first step, they know they've already won. They don't even have to prove anything because you gave up before it even started. So keep that in mind the next time you have to defend the boundary, because most likely, as you defend your boundary, you become the person who initiates the conflict in reality, meaning that there's a 98% chance that the other party is just going to step down. They did their probing, they did their test, you responded the right way with confrontation, and so they're going to just say, okay, I tried and it didn't work. And this connects to the idea that attack is the best defense. So when someone violates, and I use the term violate on purpose, a clearly established boundary, you should immediately call them out. Because if it's clearly established, it means that you took the time to say, hey, this is okay, this is not okay, please don't do this. They remember that, they're not dumb, and so if they did it, it means that they did it on purpose. So it's an offense, it's a violation, and it is your responsibility to meet that violation with the right level of severity. Which is essential to boundaries, by the way. I'm starting to see this new brand of boundaries where they're supposed to be flexible and you're not supposed to be too in people's face. That's bullshit, right? Times and times again, when I see this idea being propagated, it's by female influencers, which I'm not surprised by because they have found a way to keep their female audience stagnant. They have found a way to take something, a concept that is conflict dependent, and then remove the conflict, which is not doing anyone a favor because women in priority are afraid of conflict because they're the ones who are at the highest risk of severe injuries if violence occurs. But by telling their female followers, their women followers, that they can establish boundaries without the severity that comes with it, the only thing these women do is they set their audience up for failure and for abuse. Because if a boundary isn't strict, no one is going to respect it. Again, refer to the type of people that are pushers. Refer to me. If you share a boundary with me and it's flimsy, that's no boundary. You've already established that you don't have even the balls to tell me what you don't like. So you think I'm not going to do it? I know you're never going to defend yourself. Whereas if a boundary is strictly addicted, I might tell myself, okay, this person clearly knows what they're talking about. They clearly know what they're okay with and not okay with. And that is going to make me much less likely to try that boundary. And let me go for feminists for a second. This is especially important for women because the type of people whose boundaries are disrespected the most are women, for what I just explained. Most men, the ones who are going to be pushers, know that women don't have the physical strength to back up their boundaries. So if you lack the physical strength and you lack the severity, you have fucking nothing. As a woman, you need to be twice as severe. Your boundaries need to be fucking ironclad. Do away with all of this kindness in your heart that I see women propagate all the fucking time, or I see women who say, well, he was being creepy and pushy, but I didn't want to make him uncomfortable. Fuck that shit. If a dude is doing things that are clearly crossing boundaries, especially physical ones, it's your responsibility to stand up for yourself and say no. Because at the end of the day, what do you prefer? Hurting a guy's feelings or ending up in a dumpster somewhere because you want it to be nice? It might sound hyperbolic, but a lot of women who get severely abused, it started with this. It started with a guy probing and testing boundaries, seeing that there was none and knowing, okay, this is prey, I can do with that woman whatever I want. If you are a chick and you're watching this right now, I highly recommend the book The Gift of Fear. It will absolutely change your life. So, strict boundaries, stick to them. To that, you could ask a follow-up question. What if this escalates to physical violence? What if I establish a boundary, someone violates it, I check them verbally, and they still don't take no for an answer? Well, as I just explained, it won't happen because boundary pushers are by and large cowards, and that also includes me. Whenever I push boundaries to get shit that I want, if someone stands up to me, I never try again because I've learned my lesson. I know that it's not worth it for me because I don't want to be at the end of the negative social interaction that comes with someone calling me out because I disrespect boundaries. Again, it's the same with predators. If a lion goes after a zebra and he gets hit once, that hit is not going to kill it, but he's never going to try again with that zebra because he just learned his lesson. So the chance of the entire scenario devolving into a physical confrontation is extremely low. You know, as a pusher, I can tell you that The thing that protects that type of behavior the most is social conventions. Paradoxically, it's what I explained previously. Because we live in a non-violent society, if I push your boundaries, I know I'm protected by these conventions because you're not going to punch me in the face for it, even though you would be justified. Instead, you're forced to play the dance. But this also means that if these people get called out, if the pusher's behavior gets called out, he will stop there. He won't take that extra step because that extra step leads to violence, and violence is the one thing that the pusher is trying to avoid. So when thinking about dishing out boundaries, think of them as a jolt. A boundary is a jolt of negative social interactions. It's telling to someone, no, don't do that. That's disrespectful. That's not okay. This, for the most part, is enough because people don't like, again, these interactions. Some pushers are more persistent and they'll try times and times again. They'll circle back like a shark to see if they can weaken your boundaries. But if your boundaries remain firm, at some point, they will stop. And you'll start to find that it becomes quite addictive to defend your boundaries. It's quite addictive to put these people in their place. It's actually the exact opposite of what I described previously when you don't have strong boundaries. When you don't have strong boundaries, you teach yourself that you're worth nothing because you're not even willing to fight for yourself. But when you stand up for yourself, your self-esteem grows. You think, hey, I'm worth something. And the proof of the matter is that whenever someone tries to attack that worth, I check them, I put them in their place. And this has a positive effect because then you become more confident, and because you become more confident, less and less people try your boundaries. So this time, it's the law of attraction applied properly. The more boundaries you have, the more solid you become, the less people test them, and the easier your life is going to be. Because now, instead of attracting predators, you're going to attract people who are going to be kind. Not because they're kind, but because your behavior forces them to be kind. Because if they're not, you check them. But for the sake of the argument, let's say that you're put in an extreme scenario where verbal interactions are not enough and your boundaries are still being disrespected. What else is there for you to do? Well, at this point, you have two choices. Either one, you become violent. So you defend your worth, you defend yourself with your body. Now, I can already tell you that this is not going to be as glorious as you think it's going to be, because as someone who was put in this scenario, in this situation, you're going to be the asshole. If someone is disrespecting your boundaries only verbally and you punch them in the face, people are going to look at you like you have a problem. It's only happened to me a few times, and it was always in scenarios where I was forced to interact with someone who was clearly not well in the head and who just wouldn't learn their lesson with just words. Someone in my classroom, for example, that I was forced to interact with on a daily. And at some point, because their actions were making my life miserable, I had to intervene. And so I went out of my way to punch them. Made me look like a total psychopath, but at some point you have to decide what is more important, the way people view you or your own personal ability to look at yourself as a person and love yourself. Then, and this is the second option that I would tell you to choose most times, remove yourself. If someone, times and times again, refuses to follow the rules that you set for yourself or for your interactions, you don't need them in your life. You don't need to waste time on them. They're never going to change because they've already demonstrated that they don't respect you. So at this point, just leave. Just cut that person out of your life. And that goes for friends, it goes for lovers, it even goes for family. Because if anything, family members should be the one who respect your boundaries the most. Because they should be the one who respect you the most. Just because they're blood doesn't mean that they're magically immune from the type of treatment reserved for people that don't respect us. And I know it's easier said than done when you're a child. If you're stuck in an household with parents who are assholes, bide your time and wait for the day where you can leave these motherfuckers behind. I know it can be very, very tough and very trying, but if you try to engage in violence, you're going to be put in an even worse situation because you don't have the power in that scenario. So it's sad, and I feel for you, but you just have to wait. So that's for conflict. But what about if you're too agreeable? Well, this one's a bit more difficult because you might be born more agreeable. For example, if you are a woman, you might naturally not like to engage in that type of confrontation. So what you can do instead is you can try to, in your daily life, modify your behavior bit by bit to integrate more disagreeableness in your interactions. So for example, I would want you to be the opposite of a yes man. I know that in the 70s and 80s in the US, it was this big positivity movement of never saying no, so that you can open yourself up to all of the possibility in life. That's fine and all if you're someone who's a shut in or who never actually lets themselves be out there. But if you are highly agreeable, most likely you have the exact opposite problem. You don't say no enough. Oftentimes you think no and your heart thinks no, but you say yes because you want to please people. That is no bueno. You need to start saying no. No is the most powerful word that you can say because it shuts down negotiation. A no is a no, and that is it. It's going to teach you how to set strong boundaries. So when you don't like something or want to do something, say no and then stick to it. And that is the hard part, because pushers always see a no as a future yes. They see a no as something they can probe enough that eventually turns into a response that aligns more with what they want. But what they want doesn't fucking matter. What matters is what you want. So just like with boundaries, nothing is worse than a no that is taken back, because it makes you look weak. It teaches people in your life that your words have no value, and it teaches you that you have no value. So start to still your decisions a bit more and reserve your time and energy for people who love you and who respect you. And you'll find that your daily life is going to greatly improve, because once you start becoming a no man or a no woman, you'll find that there are certain people in your life that will no longer want to hang with you. These are the people that used to abuse you. Now you're no longer an easy target, so they don't want to be around. The people that will stick around will appreciate your boundaries. And that is a dead giveaway, a green flag, like the youth likes to say, of someone who is a good person who should be in your life. When you set a boundary, they're grateful for it, they appreciate it, because it allows them to treat you the way you want to be treated. And that leads us to the last part, which is the people-pleasing part. You, most likely, please people as a habit because you have bought into the idea that the only way for you to be liked is to be useful to others. And that is a symptom of low self-worth, and something that you learned at some point of your childhood. It's something you're going to have to unlearn, because it's not true. You as a person are valuable regardless of the use people can make of you. Again, the only individuals who are going to appreciate you only for what you do for them in your life are the bad ones. They're the ones you don't really want around. The others are going to be satisfied with just your presence, because your presence is enough to make them happy. So that's another good litmus test. Once you stop giving friends a ride, once you stop giving friends money, do they stick around? If they don't, they were never your friends. They're all parasites taking advantage of you. These people are like vampires. They're going to suck on your kindness until there's nothing left. So if you really want to preserve that kindness, to be able to use it for the people that matter, then apply all of the advice I gave you in this video. It's going to be hard, it's going to be uncomfortable, but this is what you need to do, because this is what is going to allow you to preserve who you are. You are a good person, you are a kind person. Don't let this word take that away from you. And you'll find that once your kindness is no longer just a consequence of your weakness, it's also going to be much more useful, because now it has actual value. Now you're not forced to do it because you don't have a choice. Now you're going out of your way to be a good person because you've decided that this is the way you want to lead your life. And that is going to conclude this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I sure did. I love making these episodes in the woods. If you have any topics about self-improvement, mental health, life advice you want me to delve into, let me know in the comments. I would love to explore ideas that you guys want to hear more about. If you want to support the channel, again, first link in the description. And that's going to be it for me. I'm going to wish you a very good rest of your day. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.